Welcome to Local Heroes here on WKFK DTV7, where we interview veterans of the military and we bring you their stories, unedited and unchanged. So don't go away. We'll be right back with a very interesting story from one of our local veterans. Hello and welcome to Local Heroes here on WKFK TV7, coming to you from the GI Museum. Very special show with a very special guest. Major Larry Hatten, retired, 27 years in the United States Army. I'm going to call you Larry, if that's okay, since fine. I know you so well. Larry, you got started in the United States Army in 1963.
Right. I graduated from USM in Hattiesburg, took an ROTC commission.
So you went to USM in Hattiesburg?
Right.
All right. And after that, you were sent to?
I went to Fort Gordon, Georgia for signal school. That was my branch, Signal Corps. And then I went to airborne school at Fort Benning. And then I went overseas to Europe, and I spent 3 years in Europe.
Now, you went to France and Germany.
Right. I was stationed a year in France and then 2 years in Germany.
Yes, for people that don't know, we were in France for many years after World War II, but they asked us to leave, in essence, didn't they?
Yeah, Charles de Gaulle had his feelings hurt right after World War II, or close to it, and he never liked the Americans. So after I was transferred to Germany, they moved all the troops out of France.
And while you were in Germany, what were you doing with the Army?
I was still in Signal Corps. We had 50 radio stations throughout Europe. We were the Bell Telephone of Europe at that time. In the 60s.
Okay, you were fighting the Cold War, is basically
right.
What you were doing.
Yeah, we our mission was, if the balloon went up, run. that's all we were. That's all we had, you know. A few weapons.
Yeah, couldn't stop them.
You know, it was the guys along the border there that had to do that.
Oh, okay. And then after Germany, you were there for 3 years in Germany.
Right.
Anything memorable happened in those 3 years while you were there?
I was selected by the battalion to audit all the mess funds. We had all these isolated sites up on top of the hills. So I've been on all the high hills in Germany and France. So that was a fun trip.
Cool.
Took me about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Did it in my little Volkswagen.
In your little, oh, okay. And then after in Germany, you went back to the United States and you went to a military intelligence aerial surveillance school?
First I went to military. I transferred branches and I went to the military intelligence basic course.
Okay.
That's at Fort Holabird, and it's no longer there. And then while I was there, I went to the aerial surveillance school, which was 9 months long. And there they taught me how to read imagery, photographic imagery, how to plan reconnaissance missions. And I was headed to the Combined Intelligence Center in Vietnam right after that. And when I got to Vietnam, I was at Camp Alpha, which is up near Benoit Air Base. And they said, you're not going to the Combined Intelligence Center. You're going to be an advisor. So they sent me into the advisory chain. And after a couple of days, I wound up with the 7th Vietnamese Infantry Division as a staff officer, an advisor there with them.
Now, this was 1967,
and I ended up in the city of Mito. And we lived in a Catholic seminary, a couple of hundred of us.
And then, you hadn't been to a Vietnamese language school, had you?
No.
How did you communicate with these guys?
with a lot of sign language. They had known Americans. They could speak a little bit of English, some of the guys.
So you get assigned to this Vietnamese unit, and then you had to go out in the field with them.
Right. There was a reconnaissance company, and there were 4 in the division, had 100 men, and that would fit on 10 helicopters. So they'd come in with what do they call the flight? There's 10 of the guys lined up. We run and jump on the airplane. They take us out and put us in.
They lifted you and inserted you into LZ.
Yeah. And if we found anybody, then they'd bring in some heavier troops.
So you were out looking for the VC, the Viet Cong.
Right.
And you probably would engage them if they found you first or if you got too close.
Right.
Have some charts here?
Give you a quick chart there.
All righty.
I was way down here in 4 Corps. In 4 Corps, there was only one American unit. There was one brigade of the U.S. 9th Division. And all of this was before Vietnamization. So we would protect the rice belt here. That's what the Viet Cong wanted. And the Viet Cong movement started down here in Bien Hoa province, south of Mito, south of Saigon. So we would go way out here near the Parrot's Beak, conduct operations along Highway 4 and further out near the border. So you'd be out there with 100 Vietnamese, and you just hoped bad guys didn't want you that day.
So you were protecting the rice belt. That was important.
Keeping Highway 4 open and protecting the rice belt.
Because that was where all the rice was being produced for the country.
Yeah, the VC would have provincial mobile battalions, they called them. And there was about 350 people, and they would travel about 4 Corps. And they had prepared positions, and they'd move from one position to another. And the day that I had the big battle, it was the 514th Provincial Mobile Battalion. They had had a battle with the U.S. 9th Division about 6 months earlier, and they lost a couple of hundred guys. So I don't know if they were full strength by that time, but there were a lot of guys. And
so describe for us, okay, you got another chart here. And here we go.
Okay, this is Mito, and this is Highway 4 going along, and goes on down to the city of Canto. Up here, there's what they call the double Y canals. The VC like to run up and down these canals, and we landed one day right here in an open field, and that's on this next chart.
This one?
This one, yeah. Yeah, we landed out in this field, 100 of us, and the helicopters pull out. It's nice and quiet, and nobody's opened up on us. So we start going in this direction, going toward the west, and we run into a tree line here, and we see a lot of footprints going north. So we started following them, and we got up here to the canal, and we doubled back over this way, and that's when they started firing on us. And then the company commander, he went this way, and my job was to go with him wherever he went, because I had to put in the airstrikes and do the medevac. So we ended up here on this corner of the VC. We're in this rectangle, we found out later. We're in this hut, and we started directing airstrikes. And so all day long I was putting airstrikes on this row of bunkers. Then they brought in another recon company to our left. They brought in 2 more recon companies on this side, and then they brought in a ARVN battalion on this side. It's getting toward the end of the day. So we pretty well decimated this flank of the enemy, and we were getting ready to assault, and the little ARVN commander said, one more helicopter strike to get their head down. We're going to assault. So I talked to the lead helicopter, and he said, I'm going to mark friendlies. And he was in his daisy chain, and he came by and he dropped the smoke. And the guy behind him didn't hear him, and he thought that was a signal for bad guys. So he put 4 rockets into that smoke, and that ruined our whole day.
It ruined yours too.
I was in shock and bloody, and Vietnamese laying everywhere all over the place. And my radio operator came over and pulled me out. And
Where were you, Larry? You in that little hut?
I was in this little hut, and I was looking out this side, zeroing my weapon. And what saved me, I got a cramp in my leg. And I laid down right in the middle of that hut so I could get the cramp out, and I was listening on the radio, and that's when all hell broke loose. So I'm lucky to be here today. So then we got to get the wounded Vietnamese out. So the helicopter said, we did it, we'll come get them. So I'm sitting here flashing my little flashlight. It's just getting dusk, and the guy comes in low, there's smoke, and he wheels it around, and he drops that tail rotor right up over me.
Oh, man.
And my radio operator, he was a big kid, he was throwing the Vietnamese on like sacks of potatoes. And we got them all on there but one, and he died during the night. And then the ARVN attacked, and they got repulsed. So during the night, we were shooting artillery in here, and Spooky was doing his job on them.
Now describe for the folks.
And
what
Spooky is a C-47 gunship at that time. And he shoots, and you see these things coming down. It's a Gatling gun, and they look like they're coming at you, and then they trail off. So that's a little nerve-wracking. But the next morning, we assaulted, and the VC had withdrawn. The ARVN never surrounded an enemy completely. They didn't want to take casualties either. So they would box them in on three sides, shoot artillery, and then hope they got enough, and they would withdraw. And then I got some pictures over there of the graves that we found the next day.
Yeah.
So this was a big battle.
Now ARVN stands for Army of the Republic
Army
of Vietnam.
Republic of Vietnam. That was their army guys. So these guys I fought with. Give you a quick history. The 7th Division was one of the better divisions in the Vietnamese army. And they had been told not to take casualties by Diem. If you remember, he was the president of Vietnam up to 1963. And there was a lieutenant colonel called John Paul Van. A lot of people have heard of him. He ended up in charge of the civilian part of the war over there for with the Vietnamese. And he had talked them into taking action down in a town called Ap Bach. And the Vietnamese were listening on the radio to everything that was going on. And they just creamed the South Vietnamese. So the Vietnamese didn't like to take casualties. And it was up their chain that they weren't supposed to take a lot of casualties. But overall, I think they lost 1 million men in the whole Vietnam War. Lost a bunch of guys, and we lost 500,000. So that was one battle. And can you pull that one back?
Yeah.
So I have the honor of landing on 2 VC battalions on different occasions. This one, there was an operation into the 7 Canals area. It's further west. And there's 7 canals that come together here. We were the 2nd unit in, and the other unit was across the canal, and they had already engaged the Viet Cong. And then they brought us in, and we were on the other side of the canal from the Viet Cong. And it was getting close to the end of the day, so everybody dug in, and nobody really assaulted the other guy. But during the night, they decided to leave. So they started dropping mortars in their tubes. And you can hear it go down. And you just try to dig into Mother Earth at that time. So, but the ARVN didn't chase them, and they let them go. But we spent a week. They'd take us way out, and then we'd walk back. They'd take us way out, and we'd walk back. So we searched the whole area. But the VC were gone by that time. So that was my other experience. And one funny experience, but not so funny to me, there was a Ciclo on Highway 4 here that got blown up, and had about 14 people on it. And they were all over the place. So they wanted me to go out and take a picture, because I was a G2 Air, I had the camera. So they put me on a helicopter, and they took me out there, and I got off, and I told the guy, wait a minute. He said, we'll be back in 30 minutes.
And he left.
I was the only guy out here. Only American. There was a few ARVNs, and everybody was around in the rice paddies picking up whatever they could find, change or money. So that was a hectic 30 minutes for me.
Now tell us what that was, a Ciclo?
A Ciclo is one of these motor scooters, and they put a cab on the back, and everybody get on it and go to market in the mornings. And the VC would come out here at night and put mines in the highway. And one of the division's jobs was to keep this highway open. But you could see VC flags flying in the trees over here in the tree line off the highway. So that was, now it's funny, but back then it wasn't so funny.
So I assume they got back and picked you up in 30 minutes.
Yeah, they finally came back.
Exactly.
I don't know. But After 6 months of that, every time I went out with the guys, we'd have contact. And so they transferred me to Canto, which is the capital of the 4 Corps. Let's see if we got a map of.
Well, we're going to need to take a little break
Okay.
right here, Larry, and then we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Good, good.
We're going to take a short break right here. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back to Local Heroes here on WKFK. Today we're talking with Mr. Larry Hatten, Major Larry Hatten, retired U.S. Army, 27 years. Before the break, we were talking about his experience as an advisor to the South Vietnamese Army, or the ARVN troops. And Larry, before the break, you wanted to tell us about Canto. And we've got a little map here where to show you can show where Canto is as far as a location in South Vietnam.
Okay, Canto is, or was, the capital of 4 Corps. It's a little further down from Mito and Saigon. And this had been a VCR&R area. They'd never been attacked, so it was a nice, cushy assignment. Except my second month there, they decided to have Tet 68, and they sent troops from everywhere. And we heard the fighting going off. We were having we lived in a 3-story villa, and we were having a little cookout up there, and we had some Vietnamese over, and it was their New Year, Lunar New Year, and we could see tracers going up all over the place. And we said, well, they're just firing and having fun. Well, that was the VC attacking. And then we heard an explosion over on the other side of the city, and gunfire, and that was the first shots fired by the MIBARS battalion, which is Military Intelligence Battalion, Aerial Reconnaissance and Surveillance. Their security guard saw somebody and told them to halt, and they didn't, and that's how the firing started. The VC came into the city, and there weren't any units available. Everybody was on Tet having their holiday. There was one company of ARVN around the 4 Corps headquarters, and that's what the VC wanted, was the 4 Corps headquarters. So these guys kept them from getting in there, and we found out, my little secretary, after all the battles were over, she came back to work, and she said they stopped at her house. And they said, where is such and such a street? And she said, I don't know. And the guy pulled out a pistol and put it in her face and said, where is the street?
So she her to tell.
Oh, it's over there. But they didn't have good maps, and they weren't familiar with the city, so that kept them from moving through the city so fast. But we were cut off in our 3-story villa. We fortified it. I had 17 guys in there. And we were told not to shoot at them so that they wouldn't come after us, but they were after the 4 Corps headquarters. And we took our mattresses and everything we had and fortified the firing positions. And then we watched the battle. Lasted for several days. They were attacking the Corps headquarters. And I was up on the roof, and I still had communications with the headquarters. So we would watch them mass for an attack, and we say, here they come, and then they would attack and get repulsed. But luckily, if the Corps headquarters didn't fall, and then everything else would have fallen. They were after the division headquarters. So after several weeks, the U.S. 9th finally put a combat unit in there, and I saw them walking down the street, and well, you could go out and kiss those guys.
So you're surrounded for 2 weeks.
Yeah. And we'd have little forays. We'd go out and try to get something to eat. You had to go all the way across the city to the other compound. So you go through an intersection, and the bullets would whiz and fly, and just hoping that one wasn't after you. And then we got down. The battle was still going on the other side of the city. They had pushed the VC to one side of the city into the Canto University area. And we were down at the Corps headquarters burning documents. We still thought they might be able to get us. And the G2 advisor, Colonel Carey, was coming in. This is a funny story. He was driving his Jeep back to the Corps headquarters, and a ricochet round hit him right in the back of the head and knocked him out. And he came driving into the wall. Bam! So they got him over to across the street to the little hospital there at the 4 Corps headquarters, and he said he was laying on the table, and the VC went by the window firing in at him, and he rolled off and knocked himself out again.
Oh,
So he got knocked out twice, but he made it through. That's one of the funny stories. And then there's some pictures over there that of Canto University. They had to destroy it to get the Viet Cong out. And after that, the VC weren't able to fight much. They'd lost just about everything they had. So the South and the Americans won the war during Tet, but it was Walter Cronkite that said we didn't. So everybody believed him instead.
So you surrounded for 2 weeks, and then the 9th relieves you. What happened after that? I mean, you went back to your job. Were you out in the field, or were you an advisor, or were you working?
Oh, I worked there at Corps headquarters. My job was to run the payroll, I call it. Every month, somebody had to go to Saigon and get a briefcase full of money. And so that was a nice trip. You go to Saigon, spend a day, and come back, and bring back a whole millions of piastres. That was the Vietnamese currency. And everything was fairly quiet. I played tennis with the general. I'm a tennis player. And right after Tet, he said, we're all going out to play tennis. They were still taking snipers out of the buildings down the street. He said, I just wanted to show them I wasn't afraid.
Oh, man.
So
you finished out your tour.
And then I came back to the United States and got assigned to Fort Lee, Virginia.
And what were you doing at Fort Lee?
I was the intelligence school representative on the logistics exercise committee. There was a big map exercise that they played. Thousands of people would come there in summertime, and they'd play the map games. So I had to write the whole thing, write all the plans, all the scenarios. So it was a very interesting assignment. And they called me up and said, hey, you're on the majors list. Do you still want to get out? Because I'd put in a resignation. And I said, 7 years, I'm a major. This is pretty good. So I said, no, I think I'll stay. And they sent me orders to Vietnam again. So second tour, they trained me to be a Phu Ngoc, which is a Phoenix advisor. We were going to do to the VC what the VC were doing to the South Vietnamese in the little towns. They'd go in and take out their leaders. So you kill them or capture them. So I got to Camp Alpha again, and they said, you really want to go do this? I said, no. And they said, we got an excellent job for you, G2 Air Advisor in I Corps. So I went to Da Nang and unpacked my bags, and they said, you're going out to Khe Sanh. So they were invading Laos. The Vietnamese were trying to show that they could carry the war on their own. And I was out there on I Corps Forward, out on Khe Sanh in a bunker, and we were putting in B-52s. We invented putting B-52s in the air and giving them a target coming in. Usually the cycle was 3 or 4 days, but there were so many NVA out there, and there were so many South Vietnamese getting killed. We probably bombed some of the South Vietnamese. The NVA were so close. But the Vietnamese army lost over half of its people. Nearly every company grade officer in the 1st Vietnamese division was killed. So they were never able to reconstitute because they were all from that area. And you couldn't bring guys from Saigon up to the DMZ area and expect them to fight. They wanted to go back home. So that hurt them bad. And then I came back. It was nice duty there in Da Nang. I'd fly with the 01 squadron, ate in the general's mess, run up and down on China Beach, play tennis. I'm the reigning Vietnam doubles champion and singles runner-up. So
what a title.
One tournament, and that's it, and I won it.
Well, Larry, we're out of time for this show, but we're going to bring you back for another one because we want to hear more from you. Is that okay?
Yeah. All right.
So, don't miss the next Local Heroes. We'll hear more from Major Larry Hatten, retired, 27 years, United States Army. We'll see you then. Thank you for watching this edition of Local Heroes here on WKFK DTV7, where each week we bring you a story about a veteran, unedited, unchanged, and in their own words. So join me again next week here on WKFK DTV7, or visit our website at WKFK.com for archive shows about local heroes.